burden of expectation can weigh heavily, especially as the Ferrari 488 has an illustriously rich V8 powered coupe lineage behind it, so let's do away with agonizing cliffhangers. This is an exceptional mid-engine sports car and is superior to the 458 it replaces. That's not to say Ferrari has this 200 mph sports coupe market segment sewn up neatly for itself. There's the omnipresent Porsche 911 Turbo to consider, as well as its old adversary's latest offering, the Lamborghini Huracan. And it'd be churlish to overlook the increasing popularity of the McLaren 650S or the astonishing all-round ability of the second-generation Audi R8. As per tradition, you can also order this car in convertible format as the Ferrari 488 Spider. Turbocharged V8 engine introduced one common thread linking the 488's 7 forebears is that they all featured a naturally aspirated V8 powerplant nestled immediately behind the two seats but ahead of the rear axle, each motor growing in size compared with the model it ousted. Here Ferrari's rung in the changes. So far only available in GTB coupe guise. The 3.9-litre unit is smaller than the 458's 4.5-litre V8, and it also features a pair of turbochargers. Incidentally, that 488 designation comes from the capacity of one of the engine's cylinders. Ferrari's not new to the turbocharging game. The revised California T also benefits from a version of this forced induction engine, but brand purists may feel uneasy at the prospect of their beloved V8 not screaming all the way up to 9,000 revolutions per minute in pure, unsullied form. They needn't be concerned. Yes, it sounds different. There's that familiar whoosh as the turbos spool, and the V8's as charismatically throaty, if not quite as loud. If the hairs on the back of your neck don't stand up as the rev counter arcs towards 8,000 revolutions per minute, then there's something wrong with you. In purely statistical terms, the 488's 670 horsepower, a 100 horsepower increase over the 458, and 760 Nm of torque, up 40%, are enough to propel it from 0 to 62 mph in 3 seconds and onto a top speed of 205 mph. What statistics don't tell you is how much quicker the car feels. Those figures relate to the GTB version, the only model available from launch. Expect an even faster model along the lines of the previous 458 Special to top the range in due course. Race-honed aerodynamics. There's much more to the Ferrari 488's design than an extensive facelift of the 458 before it. Clearly it's based on its predecessor, but all of the bodywork is fresh and designed with improved aerodynamics and increased downforce in mind. All of the slots, grills and inlets are first and foremost functional. There's no chamfering simply for stylistic purposes, although it goes without saying that aesthetics are a constant in all Ferrari's appeal. What's especially impressive is that the Italian marque has used its racing know-how, both from Formula One and the World Endurance Championship, to cleverly manipulate the flow of air over and under the 488. At the front is an F1 style wing mounted ahead of the radiators, while the underbody is designed in such a way that the faster the 488 goes, the more it gets sucked towards the ground. Note also the air's forced to work around the Ferrari's tail. There's a slot running from the base of the engine cover window and back out of the rear bumper, eliminating the need for an extendable spoiler, while beneath is a racing car-style diffuser that channels air away from the car in a stable manner. Even those gaping holes in the rear wings serve a dual purpose. The lower element feeds air into the turbo's intercoolers, while the upper channel directs it efficiently out of the back of the car. Incredible handling. All that performance is all well and good, but the chassis needs to be able to handle the sheer grunt being directed to the rear wheels. This it does magnificently, cornering with negligible degrees of body roll. Using the suspension and damping arrangement from the 458 Special as a starting point, the Ferrari's 5 driving modes, adaptive suspension and cutting-edge electronics work in unison to deliver a driving experience that's playful and tail-happy when you want it to be and surprisingly compliant when you need it. Read the full Ferrari 488 review to find out how good this latest take on the mid-engine V8 sports car really is. Phenomenal 670 horsepower punch in the back, rockets from 0 to 62 mph in 3 seconds, incredibly quick gear changes. There's no need to lament the fact there's only one engine available for the Ferrari 488 because it's an awe-inspiring power plant, delivering relentless performance. Turbocharged for power with a nod to efficiency, downsizings arrived at Ferrari, just as it has everywhere else in the automotive industry, but keep a sense of perspective here because at 3.9 liters, This is still a large engine. It's such a work of mechanical art that Ferrari has ensured it's constantly on display through the glazed engine cover behind the two-seater cabin. Here you can see its V8 cylinder configuration and the pair of turbochargers that help the GTB produce an astonishing 670 horsepower at 8,000 revolutions per minute. That's not as high-revving, or as deep-sounding, as the 4.5-litre V8 in its predecessor, but it's evocative enough to stir your soul every time you sink the throttle pedal against the bulkhead, an anthemic accompaniment to the speed at the 488's disposal. There's a monumental 40% increase in peak torque to 760 Nm from 3,000 revolutions per minute, in part ensuring that the 488 will scorch from 0 to 62 miles per hour in just 3 seconds. Standstill to 124 miles per hour takes just 8.3 seconds. Its top speed is a claimed 205 miles per hour, a figure we don't doubt is entirely achievable. It's not just how much power there is which is astonishing, it's the availability of it, at seemingly any speed in any gear, evidenced by Ferrari's claim of class-leading throttle response times of just 0.8 seconds in third gear at 2,000 revolutions per minute. Turbo lag, the term given to the time-lapse between flooring the throttle and the turbos delivering their surge of forced induction grunt, is non-existent. It's extraordinary in that it almost feels like a non-turbocharged car, with only their omnipresent whooshing reminding you of their presence. Does it feel as effortlessly linear as a naturally aspirated engine? No, but equally there are no uncouth step changes in power delivery. Racing car-style automatic transmission only one gearbox is on offer in the 488, a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic. If you're about to bemoan the lack of a traditional, open-gated manual, then don't. This is a superb, race-honed transmission. Left to its own self-shifting devices, up and down changes are both swift and smooth, but there's a real joy to flicking the steering column-mounted paddles. Not only are they a tactile delight and positioned perfectly with a satisfying weight to their action, they allow you to access instantaneous performance by dropping a cog or two. Gear changes are eye-wideningly rapid, each marked by the briefest of lapses in the engine note before the motor screams back up the rev range. It's a clever system too, with torque increasing in each of the 7 ratios as you blip through them. So what of these efficiency claims? Ferrari's done much to reduce friction and wastage in its new V8, reducing component mass wherever it was able. Turbocharger components made from a titanium-aluminum alloy are just one example. Compared with the 458, claimed fuel efficiencies only improved by 0.9 miles per gallon, hardly likely to inspire Greenpeace to write a congratulatory letter to Ferrari's management. Revised suspension delivers agility and composure. Electronics permit safe rear-end playfulness. 5 driving modes and adaptive dampers with 670 horsepower being fed through the rear wheels. You need to respect the Ferrari 488 to make the most of its handling prowess. Do so and even the most mutton-mittened of drivers will be able to revel in a GTB's talents. 5 driving modes. First up on the Ferrari trick list is the steering wheel mounted and F1 aping Manettino switch, allowing the driver to switch between 5 preordained settings. Wet represents the 488 GTB in its safest form with all the electronics in their most watchful state of alertness, but it's sport where you're likely to find yourself most of the time, the Ferrari feeling a little freer in its movement and responsiveness. This can be dialed up further still in race mode where the 488 becomes even more playful, thanks in a large part to Ferrari's slide slip control, SSC2. Here the car's electronics actively encourage the rear end to slide wide, but in a controlled fashion, constantly taking measurements from the levels of traction, relative wheel speed on either side of the car and the demands upon the adaptive suspension. Not only will you look heroic power sliding out of a corner, you're doing it knowing the car's still monitoring what you're up to, ready to rein in the antics before it goes wrong. The final 2 settings, CT off, traction control turned off, and escape off, all remaining stability electronics powered down, are best reserved for on-track action and, even then, more appropriate for experienced drivers. You have been warned. Improved adaptive suspension. We were impressed by how the previous 458 Special rode and handled, so it's welcome that its suspension, albeit in enhanced form, is the standard offering in the 488. Unsurprisingly, the ride is firm in its ordinary setting, yet manages not to be harsh. For many of Britain's back roads you'll need to switch it to what Ferrari amusingly calls bumpy road, permitting a much greater degree of compliance over uneven surfaces. You don't get luxury saloon-type bump absorption. You'd be disappointed if you did, but you will experience a level of damping sophistication that would be the envy of most other car companies. Staggering cornering ability. How quickly the Ferrari 488 can tackle corners is astonishing, with grip aplenty from the 305mm wide rear tires in wet and sport mode. There's nimbleness thanks to the steering having just 2 turns lock-to-lock, but it's impressively communicative, relaying instantly how much bite the front end has as you press on. It's all very reassuring. Not only does the sophisticated suspension play a role in how well it navigates bends, ensuring body roll is kept to a minimum, the race-honed aerodynamics and downforce effectively suck the 488 GTB down to the road, further reducing the likelihood of it breaking away into a spin. Impressive stopping power. Such extraordinary performance requires brakes that are more than a match and can slow the 488 down equally impressively. The standard fit Brembo Extreme design units certainly have a name that sounds appropriate, and stopping distance some 9% shorter than the 458 Italia back up the bold moniker. Powerful brakes need to be complemented by the correct choice of rubber, with specially developed track-style Michelins fitted as original equipment. Familiar-looking cabin is actually all new. Steering wheel home to myriad controls. Comfortable, low-slung driving position. At first glance, the Ferrari 488's dashboard and door paneling appears to have been carried over from its 458 predecessor, but while it looks very similar, it is in fact largely new. It's a sleeker, less fussy arrangement, with pods either side of the driver for accessing the augmented data on the screens either side of the dominant central rev counter. The right-hand screen, for the multimedia and sat-nav, also doubles as the Apple CarPlay display for cars built from 2016 onwards. All the dials are legible, although the controls take a little getting used to, which is no hardship as it's a worthwhile excuse to spend even more time in the car. This includes all the buttons and switches on the steering wheel, which initially looks like it's taken the Formula One theme a bit too far. Those push-button indicators quickly become second nature, but the pull switches for the main beam and wipers take more familiarization. Initially you wonder why every car doesn't have this solution, but then few others have. Ferrari's quick steering rack that allows you to tackle many corners without removing a hand from the wheel. It's unlikely you will have difficulty achieving a suitable driving position. The vista to ahead framed by the curving bodywork enveloping the front wheels, while the view behind reflected in the door mirrors is dominated by those gaping rear wing air inlets. Glorious. Niggles are few and are primarily limited to the 2 buttons on the driver's door to release the fuel filler flap and the front bonnet. Because the doors are wide, accessing the car in confined spaces can prove tricky, meaning that several times on test we found we caught a foot against one, or both. Dash of the buttons. Adaptive suspension to suit driving tastes. Bumpy road setting. Impressively supple supportive seats and luxurious cabin comforts. Unlikely to be the first thing on your mind when considering a Ferrari 488, but it's a reflection of the depth of talent of the mid-engine sports car, how it combines exhilarating driving pleasure and a supple ride quality. Yes, for many UK roads, not just when you leave the motorway, the standard, firmer setting will prove too rigid for most customers. Instead, the bumpy road setting, activated by a button on the steering wheel, offers a fine balance of sportiness and compliance. The secret is the effectiveness of the 488's adaptive dampers, the system an effective evolution of what was already an impressive setup when fitted to the previous 458 Special. Slink into the Ferrari, you sit very close to the ground, and most will find it amply spacious with a good range of elbow and legroom in the 2-seater cabin. Taller occupants may find that headroom's a little limited, but it's still comfortable with the seat back recline even further than you might ordinarily. At first acquaintance the seats look firm and undercushioned, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Such is their design that you feel as though they're wrapped around you, supporting you in such a way as to keep you securely nestled during vigorous cornering without making you feel remotely pinched at the hips. Under hard acceleration the engine's ferocity is inescapable, but this essentially adds to the 488's drama. Sit at a steady motorway speed and it's subdued enough to have a conversation with your passenger without needing to shout at one another. Dual zone climate control comes as standard in GTB specification, and while it's sufficiently effective most of the time, we did find that on a hot day, in crawling urban traffic, the ventilation system became quite noisy as the aircon sought to keep a cabin at a suitably chilled temperature. Standard equipment on the meager side, enormous and expensive range of options still worthwhile personalizing your car from launch. There's just a single 488 derivative available, the GTB, for Gran Turismo Blanetta, but during this model's life cycle we expect it to be joined by an even higher performance model in the mold of its F430 Scuderia and 458 special predecessors. Standard Ferrari 488 Coupe equipment standard is not a word one associates with Ferrari. That's not an overblown marketing statement, more a reflection of the fact that for several years no car has left the firm's Maranello factory without having extra cost options bestowed upon it. Think instead of the GTB as the starting point that can be personalized to your own standards. In addition to its impressive mechanical specification, you'll also find 20-inch alloy wheels, carbon ceramic brakes, a full leather interior, a multimedia system with sat-nav, rear parking sensors and the Hell Start, Stop function included in the price. Optional Ferrari 488 Coupe accessories. There's an argument that the 488 GTB already possesses the essentials you'll need and anything from the extensive optional equipment list is mere frippery. More pragmatically, ordering new Ferrari is an occasion to say the very least, so to specify it to your tastes, when the likelihood is you'll treasure it for years to come, makes sense. Choose those personalization options wisely and you could have a positive impact upon the car's residual values. The specialists at the showroom will be able to guide you through this process. So, what's on the options list? There's a range of paint finishes, including 10 hues selected from Ferrari's historic palette, with the further option of having the roof painted in a contrasting Nero black. Silver-painted 20-inch alloy wheels are standard, but these can be replaced by chrome or dark-painted versions, or swapped entirely for forged wheels, also 20 inches in diameter. Once you've decided upon the rims, you can then mull over whether to plump for one of the 8 optional shades of brake caliper or if the carbon fiber center caps are to your taste. Carbon fiber also features in the body addenda options with the front spoiler, side sills, rear diffuser, fog lamp housing and engine surround all available in the lighter weight material. There's also the nod to Ferrari's racing heritage with the Scuderia shield badges inset into the front wings. Additionally, there's a raft of features to help protect your 488's bodywork, including anti-stone chip film, front parking sensors, cameras front and rear, a suspension lifter to make life with speed bumps easier and, for safer nighttime driving, headlamps with a cornering function. Now for the inside. Don't like the standard black leather? No problem, as there are 14 optional shades of hide to consider, along with 18 different colors for the contrasting stitching. You've also got 8 carpet hues to choose between. More? Of course. There are 4 optional seat designs, a total of 9 seatbelt colors, plus the seats can be made to adjust electrically as well as featuring an embroidered interpretation of Ferrari's prancing horse logo. That's not all, either. The upper elements of the dash have a choice of 11 leather colors, the lower half in 15. Keep the steering wheel in leather and you've a palette of 14 hues, 15 if you spec it in Alcantara, or you could add carbon fiber and LED rev counter lights to it. Then you're left to ponder whether to have your rev counter in black, red, white or yellow. Naturally, various elements of the dashboard can be finished in carbon fiber. The center console can also be specified in 15 different shades of leather, while custom-made luggage can additionally be included. If that's still not enough, you can pay extra for a bespoke service, and Ferrari promises a virtually limitless range of colors and finishes. Not crash tested by experts at EuroNCAP. Multitude of electronics to minimize accidents occurring, airbags and a strong safety cell should the worst happen. Don't bother scouring EuroNCAP crash testing data for an analysis of the Ferrari 488 safety credentials, because it's beyond the scope of that organization's program. While the 488 is a car that commands respect from the driver, such is the way of the modern world that Ferrari wouldn't want an endless stream of social media shared images of wrecked GTBs vying for timeline attention, hence the cutting-edge electronics on board to minimize the chances of an accident happening in the first place. The less extreme Manettino settings of wet and sport ensure there's more of a safety net while you exploit the 488's power, yet even in race and CT off modes the slide slip control, SSC2, is designed in such a way to allow the rear end to power slide out but within predetermined confines to reduce the risk of spinning completely around. Deceleration is deeply impressive thanks to the standard fit carbon ceramic brakes, which reduce stopping distances by 9% compared with its 458 predecessor. If you are unlucky enough to find yourself involved in an accident, there are 4 airbags to help cushion the blow with an immensely strong body around you to absorb the majority of the energy from the crash. 230-litre front boot is well trimmed. Useful amount of interior cubbies. Suspension lift remains optional. Potential Ferrari 488 buyers are likely to have access to other, more practical cars within their personal fleets, but this coupe is surprisingly easy to live with on a daily basis. The boot's located up front, under the deeply scalloped bonnet, and is fully carpeted and protected by a rubber edging seal so that water ingress is highly unlikely. There's 230 litres of space in there, not far off your typical city car, although its shape means it's unlikely you'll squeeze in a large suitcase. A couple of aeroplane overhead locker-sized cases or a few Fortnum and Mason grocery shopping bags will slot in nicely, though. Engine access is fine for the essential activities you'll want to do under its glazed cover, namely showing the motor off, but ancillaries, such as the washer bottle access, are found under the boot. The washer jets themselves are comically feeble, squirting with all the gusto of a water pistol from a pound shop, but the automatic wipers have a sensibly broad sweep. One option we would recommend, particularly if your 488's likely to spend a lot of time in urban areas with speed bumps, is the suspension lift, which raises the nose up to stop all that expensive underbody from getting scraped. There's a surprisingly decent amount of storage space around the cabin with a glove box, shallow door pockets, nets on the bulkhead behind the seats, a well large enough for a smartphone by the USB socket in the center tunnel, and a single cup holder. Driver and passenger will presumably have a share to beverage, but such are the sacrifices to be made for Ferrari ownership.